So this is Author Talk with Richard Lowe. Today I'm welcoming Alison Morton. She's well, let me just read her introduction and you'll understand. Have you ever wondered what it might be like if a small part of the Roman Empire still existed in the 21st century? Well, Alison Morton has explored this in acclaimed Roma Nova series featuring modern Praetorian heroines. She blends her deep love of history with 6 years of military service in a special communications regiment and a life of reading crime, historical, and thriller fiction. A Roman nut since age 11, Alison says she has misspent decades clambering over Roman sites throughout Europe and admits to an obsession with gazing at Roman concrete. On a more serious note, she holds a master's in history and blogs about Romans, alternate history, writing, and publishing. When not writing, she speaks at conferences in the UK, France, Ireland, and the US, runs workshops on writing and publishing, and contributes a monthly column to her local English language magazine. But mostly she continues to write thrillers with tough heroines, cultivates a Roman herb garden, and drinks wine in France with her husband. So let me welcome Alison Morton to our show. Good morning, Alison. How are you today?
Good morning. Very well today, thank you. We've had a terrible heat wave recently and it's actually now gone into a lot cooler. So we're all feeling a bit ready to be creative again.
Well, great. Great. So you're a Roman nut. Tell me about that.
Oh, this goes back. I was 11 and we were on holiday in northeast Spain, on the coast. Now, my father was a numismatist and historian, apart from anything else. He also ran a small business with antiquities. And we'd gone to what was then called Ampurias, which was called Emperes in Greek times. And I had never seen such extensive Roman mosaics. I mean, they were beautiful. They were overwhelming. And there was rooms and rooms and rooms of these things. And I don't know, in England, whenever you went on holiday, your assignment when you got back was to write up what I did on holiday. So I'm doing drawings of all these patterns and they're incredibly complex. And my father said, oh, I'll take a couple of photos. Fine. So I said, well, who are these people? You know, who used to live here? And he then started telling me about senators and sailors and traders and slaves and military and Rome and the conquest of the known world. So I said to him, yeah, but what did the mummies and children do? Oh, they stayed at home and the mummies ran the house and the children were good. And I said, really? And I sort of thought about this and did some more drawings. And I said to him, what do you think it would have been like if the women had been in charge, if the mummies had run everything? Would it have been different? And very wise man, he didn't fall into that one. He said, well, what do you think it would have been like? Now that went on and on and on in my head for decades. And I did my own military service. I ran a small business. I got married, had a family, did all the stuff everybody does. And then one day we went to a really bad film. And the photography was great. There was Ewan McGregor in, which is something ladies will perhaps appreciate more, and Tom Hanks, so you're guessing which sort of area we're in. And the dialogue was absolutely terrible. The plot didn't follow. It was dreadful, really. And I turned to my husband and said, do you know, I could do better than that. And he said, well, why don't you? And I went home in 90 days. I got 90,000 words on my computer, which is insane. And I hadn't got a clue what to do with it. But so Rome came back X decades later from that little 11-year-old in the hot sun.
Did you publish that book?
Yes, that was, if I'm allowed, #1 in Septio. And that started the whole series off. And I just sort of couldn't stop. I wrote that book. And then I thought, oh, I must find out what's happened to our heroine so many years later. And then I dipped into her life. I thought there's a lot of unresolved stuff here. We've got to do it. So I then wrote a third book and that became a trilogy. I'd written my trilogy, got the Romans out of my system. When I was writing #3, I thought, this secondary character, the grandmother of the heroine, she's really, really interesting. Now, what secrets has she got hidden in her past? I've got to find out her story. So, of course, I thought, right, I'll write a 4th book.
Hold it up a little bit higher.
Sorry, Aurelia. That's her name. I thought, okay, we'll do her story. That'll be great. This will be an addition to the trilogy. And then I got to 86,000 words and found that I hadn't even got a third of the story out. So it had to be another trilogy. So which ended up with 2 more books. So it's very unusual when I've written 2 trilogies within a series, if you like, which is quite peculiar. And last year everybody was challenging to do a novella. So I thought, I can't write anything that short. And I challenged myself, and I took our heroine when she was quite a young officer to Canada, well, Quebec, Canada, and the Eastern United States, as it's called in the world of Roman Over, and came up with this little novella, which I did put into print after a while. So, and now I'm writing a series of short stories on the various Roman Over things, tying up other ends, introducing solutions to some things. I don't think I can leave this Roman thing alone. Oh, I'm trying to.
I know the feeling. Rome is one of my favorite interests, and I've been studying it for years, so we have a similar interest there.
Yeah. Well, it goes on, Rome, if you like, Rome in quotes, went on for 1,229 years in its various forms, from its sort of tribal village through to, you know, kneeling in the sand before a barbarian king at the west, and then, of course, on into Constantinople later. So there's an awful lot there for any civilization to watch its growth and its development, its golden age, and then when it all starts sort of going downhill. And it's an interesting cycle that I think most empires go through. But Rome, there was nothing like Rome until Rome, and there was not the level of prosperity and wealth again until the Victorian age. So I think it really captures our imagination from so many different ways.
Well, also it's fairly well recorded, so there's a lot of screenplays, not screenplays, but you know what I mean.
There's gaps here and there, which are very irritating. And the recording is done only by, if you like, the literate elite class. So you sort of have to think a little bit about what's behind these people making these comments. But you get somebody like Pliny, who's a fabulous old gossip, who goes into all these little tiny weeny details, and he's absolutely marvellous. But yeah, at least we have recordings.
Yeah, I'm the only person I know who's watched I, Claudius. In fact, I've watched it 3 times in the new Roman series. And I know it's historically inaccurate, and the Romans have British accents and stuff, but it's still fun. All right, so you talked about the start of your journey to be a writer. It's probably not real to most of our audience that you actually wrote a 90,000 word book in 90 days. So how did you do that?
I think it was something that had been suppressed, if you like, for a long time. I've always had an imagination. One of my school reports said, if Alison could concentrate more, she would achieve more. She has an overactive imagination. And of course, for a writer, we want an overactive imagination. I trained in languages, in French and German. I could speak some Italian and Spanish. So that was going to be my area. So I was doing words from quite a young age. I sort of learnt French on holidays as a child in the south of France. So words were my thing, if you like. So that's sort of floating around in the background. And I'd written government papers, military reports, done an enormous amount of translation because I worked as a translator and had my own business as such. I've edited a magazine, so I've been wording all my life, if you like. But the creative side, the burst, I don't know quite how that came out. I was just selling my business before we moved to France. And in a way, I've been running this business for 15 years. And when you're selling it, you keep it going, you keep it in tip-top condition. but you're not going out getting a load of new clients. You're not plotting and planning for the next year, 5 years. And I had this time, so I could devote the whole of the day to it, and often the whole of the evening. It was complete rubbish. Well, it wasn't complete rubbish, but that first book is always a bit of a practice book. And it took me 3 years to get it into publishable state. And I learnt my trade of being a novel writer. I think a lot of people think, oh, you just type it all out and there it is. But you have to learn a little bit about the structure and the theory and plot devices and characterization. You have to learn craft techniques. And I went to conferences and classes. I got a mentor. I joined groups. I went to events. I learnt about the publishing industry as well as doing all those craft things as well. And I think time spent doing that is one thing I would recommend to anybody. Go to some classes, learn your craft, your trade. And although I'd been wordy all my life, and I knew how to string sentences together in reasonable sort of bits, I didn't know how to write novels. So that's a huge recommendation from me, if you like.
Well, I actually have a set of courses called Fiction Masterclass. That's where this video appears. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I stress, and you just reinforced, is if you're going to be an author, you have to jump in and do it professionally and be a real author, just like you would any other career. You can't do it as a hobby. I mean, you can, but you're not going to make it. And it's work. It requires effort, and it requires focus.
Yes.
You just reinforce that. Why don't you describe a little bit more about that journey?
Well, I think it's one where you have to be a little bit humble about it. However good or prominent or high status your previous job has been, or your current job is, if you're still working, you have to sort of recognize that you're not quite back at the beginning, but you're almost going back to being an apprentice. So I think that's something you have to learn, that you don't know it all, however good you were at doing whatever. Now, as an ex-translator, I am very picky about getting the right word, because that's one of the biggest things, accuracy. But also as a translator, the most important thing is getting the message across. So I tend to write, I visualize a scene and then I describe it. I see these people in my head and what they're doing. And then you can follow their actions. Sometimes getting somebody across a room can be quite hard. When you're choreographing fights, my poor husband, I have to I put my arm around his neck and pull, and he goes, ah! I said, that's the noise I want. The research into things like that is extremely important. Never think you can gloss over it, because you can't. Even when although I write alternative history, which is you take a point in history and the timeline divides, and the timeline you've invented goes off on its own way. You've got to make it go in a logical progression. You can't just suddenly have cats in masks from outer space. You can't do silly things. So you're going back again to the humble side. You've got to think, well, I think I know when that happened, or I think I know how a Glock loads, or I think I know what Roman religion would be and how it would look like in the 21st century. No, you don't. You've forgotten, because you need to go back to your source books. I'm sure that if anybody looked at my search history on Google, they see Glocks, bullpup rifles, how to make a bomb, all this stuff. I mean, terrible. But if you get that wrong, people who enjoy reading adventure stories will moan, because rightly so. It's being very thorough as well with all that. If you want readers, you're asking readers to part with money, which is already earned and taxed. So if you don't give them the credible and professional product, why should they give you their money?
Yeah, one of the jobs of a writer is to allow your reader to suspend their disbelief, plausible reality. And when you break that, You lose your reader.
Totally. And you can do it in one word. Just in one word you can do it. A little anachronistic expression, or I had to, when I was writing Aurelia, I had to remember they did not have the technology of today, but they did have things like fax machines. Then I had to think, when did they go over from thermal paper to plain paper fax? Now, I'm writing a different timeline, so I've got a bit of wiggle room. I can make them more progressive, less progressive, but I quite like to keep it along a similar-ish technological state. Roman ovens are very clever. They're like their ancestors. They're very technologically advanced, very advanced on the engineering side. So they're always a little bit ahead of the game. But I had to go back and research, and I thought, oh yeah, that'll be the 90s. No problem. Late 90s. No, 1983, first plain paper fax. And you think you remember it and you don't. So I would say read around your subject, your area, your time, whether you're writing history, sci-fi, even contemporary, because you can't know everything about the world. And that's, again, back to the humble attitude of realizing you may not know everything.
Yes, research is a big part of writing. Even when you're writing science fiction, which is more where I lean, you have to research everything, or at least research your own world, which is interesting.
Yes, yes. And I think you need to take the reader with you. I mean, I always bang on about plausibility and credibility. You can do anything as long as you can anchor it back to what the reader may have seen or experienced. I mean, we've all seen Star Trek in its various forms, and they have their communicators. And we went, wow, wouldn't that be fantastic to have that in my hand? I could talk to somebody and see stuff and write stuff. Well, here's the smartphone. So when Gene Roddenberry wrote that, he had that in his imagination that could happen. And it was perfectly plausible that people in outer space would have that. So were capable of putting the Enterprise up, which actually really wouldn't fly, but never mind. If you're capable of putting that up, they would have had handheld communicators. I have to take my Romans and put them in a modern age. So I have to think, how would they get the Roman mindset and what would they be doing? They're more robust than perhaps the average Western country. They just get in there and do it. That's the Roman way. You threaten us, we'll come and sort you out. They are joiners, but they won't damage their own interests. So they maintain this attitude. What I have done, though, and this is where the slightly science fiction-y part of alternate history comes in, is I have women running the show, and that makes it quite interesting, but men are not disadvantaged. So this is a little bit of a, in science fiction, you can come up with an idealistic world according to how you like it, but you must make it plausible and credible.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about how you balance showing and telling. I've got a product on that, of course. I'm just curious about how you do that.
Yeah. Okay. So the general thing is that you must show and not tell. That's the general fashion at the moment. Yet we read books full of telling. We love Jane Austen, which is full of telling. But she's very, very good at showing. And showing is more fun because it means you can write dialogue. In the science fiction world, now look, Bob, this super duper laser gun is the one in which we will burn all the aliens. Whereas if you say, duck, Bob, here's the alien, look, you don't want to get burned by that. Duck, there's another one. And if you write an action scene or a dialogue scene, you're showing the reader, and the reader isn't stupid. The reader will get it, and the reader will catch the excitement. Sometimes, though, if you've got to get over a bit of a time bump, or something's going on a lot, or continuously, just a couple of sentences of telling can get you through that without going through every painful detail. But I would suggest making it 10% right, and 90% showing and 10% telling. I don't condemn any particular method. The method is appropriate to the situation the book's in.
Of course. Of course. Now, you've been writing for a long time. What's your favorite memory about writing?
Oh, I think when I first unpacked the first box of books, that was absolutely wonderful. I used a publishing services company because I wanted an absolute top quality product that nobody could tell the difference between mainstream and independent publishing, because I always published independently. And I knew that although I had a lot of computer skills, and I had already done one book myself through on KDP, little history book, no, I've got to do this. And when I saw the cover, they sent it through the PDF proof of the cover, I was absolutely mind blown. So I thought that was the most exciting thing to date. And I was speechless. My husband said, "What's the matter? Is it awful?" No, it's wonderful. And then when you get this physical product in your hands and you can feel it and you open it and look at that, there it is, a real book, that really gets you in the heart. And I think that is the most exciting thing, because you've done all the work, it's been edited and proofed, and it's a beautiful design, and yes. Now the ebook's great because a lot more people can access an ebook easily, but get a box of books, that is the most exciting thing, I think.
Yeah, for me it was getting people to come up and when they want my book signed. That was the first
time.
Oh,
yes.
I'm sure you've had those experiences.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I've forgotten it because that Inceptio was the first one out in March 2013, so 5 years old. And you sort of get used to it after you've done a few talks and people come up and, oh, what name shall I put in it and all the rest of it. And I'd forgotten the slight nervousness, the imposter syndrome feeling the first time that happened, and that was at my launch. And Waterston sold out, but Silverwood Books, who I did my books through, said always take a spare box. Very good tip that. And I thought, these are all my friends, which they are at your first launch normally. And they all went, "Oh, will you sign it for me, Alison? This is so exciting." And I was all dithery and I got settled down and I forgot what that was like. I think, oh yeah, now I do it very calmly, all the rest of it. But when my husband was featured in a book, an anthology called Dull Men of Great Britain, it was hilarious and they all had boring hobbies. And we ordered a box. It was from, was it Random House? Yeah, Random House it was done through. And we ordered a box. I said, look, when I go sell my books, why don't you come with me and sell a few of those? Because he bought them at half price, which is what you can do in the mainstream, apparently. And I said, okay, now, they'll ask you to sign it. You've seen me do it. Open to the page and you sign, best wish, don't do anything else, just to Fred, best wishes, Steve Morton. Okay, right. Okay, that's fine. I'm calm. Yeah, fine, he said. First person came up and said, "Oh, would you sign it?" He went, and he was literally wordless. And I thought, and he said afterwards, this is a really weird feeling. And I'd forgotten what it was like. And that is a very overwhelming feeling. You have sort of arrived, and it's a validation in a way. And I think that's a very precious thing. And I haven't forgotten that now.
Yes, in fact, it's probably wise for authors to set up book signings so that they can have that feeling of success.
Oh, definitely. It doesn't matter where it is, whether it's a bookshop or a church stall or a market or a library or anything. And also it's great talking to people. Yeah.
Now, one thing that's interesting in this world today is Amazon book reviews. Sometimes you get glowing reviews, sometimes you get, it was fine. And I remember once I got a review that just slaughtered the book. And what do you do when you get those kind of reviews?
The first one, I went and cried in the corner, of course. I thought, how unfair, how horrible, I hate that person. When you're a new author, it's devastating, absolutely devastating. I won't say on public video what I say now, but you can imagine the second word is off now, because I know with the benefit of 80 odd behind me, that's on Amazon UK, sorry, 70 odd on Amazon US for Inceptio with a 4.6 or 7 average. I now know by sheer numbers that most people quite like the book. And now I can react. But if I get a 1 star, I do feel a little bit of, okay, right, well, it's subjective. And I think that's the thing, that's the key. It's a subjective opinion. It's not the New York Times or the Times Literary Supplement or the Guardian book page or Richard and Judy Club or whatever. It's one person who didn't get your book. Not everybody's going to get your book. I sometimes wonder why people post 1 and 2 stars. Would you go to all that bother unless you really, really hated it and felt deceived? We all say, just move on, get over it, go on to the next one. That's very easy to say. I think it's perfectly legitimate to feel a little hurt. But the thing is to remember it's subjective and it's only one person.
Yes, it's something important to keep in mind with all reviews, is that even good ones, is that it's one person, and you can't let it get to your head either way.
No, don't get a swollen head, otherwise you'll think you're master of the universe and you're not.
Yes. Do you have any tips to help other writers?
Well, when you've got your project and your idea and your characters and you've had a really good think about all this, whether in your head or you've made notes or you've done short stories or however you like it, or whether you're just going to go in, I strongly suggest you just bash your story out. Get the story out, get the bones out. It won't be good. Everybody knows the first draft is, let's say, rubbish. We all know that. Get it out, because the making of a book is at the editing stage, the first self-editing stage, because you've hopefully got all your plot points across. You've got your main turning points and your crisis and your black moment and the climax, starting with the inciting incident. You've got the structure, you've got the bones of it in. Once you've done that, then is the time to start the work on it. And you really work on it carefully. You might put a new chapter in or take some chapters out. That's when the author starts working on their book.
Got it. What about promoting the book? Tips on that?
Well, hasn't the world changed? When I first did Inceptio, and then it was followed by Perfiditas in the October following, because I had both written and edited, it was relatively easy. I mean, it's not easy, but it was relatively easy. You went into the local bookshop, in my case, Waterstones. Yeah, when do you want your launch? Okay, this is how we do it. I said, I'll bring the wine and some nibbles, and you'd invite people, email, and that was fine. And they'd all buy your book, and that would be great. And the next one wasn't so good. And the launch, then I thought, right, I'll have one in London. So I had a little launch in London, that was good, and a famous TV personality came along and interviewed me, which was rather nice, and there was a video of it, and I thought, right, let's put it out, Facebook, my blog, Twitter, the whole banana. I got into the Bookseller, which is the UK trade magazine. And I was editor's choice in there. That was great, and in their first indie review, and that was really nice. So I'm thinking, yes, it's okay. And I'm on other people's as a guest on their blogs, and I wrote for Writing Magazine, all that. So you make yourself known. But more recently, it's got a lot harder. You can try and get your book onto BookBub, which is the gold standard for they have a massive mailing list. I think it's something like 8 million people subscribe to all the different, taking all the genres together. But the big houses have discovered BookBub, and it's very, very difficult, but still keep going. other social media, your own accounts, your page, if you run a little group for your readers, and that's not always as successful as it was. I'm being very bit down here. I think you need to try everything you can come up with. So do the basics, the Facebook, the Twitter, your own blog, guest blogging, pitching articles to print magazines. Let's not forget print magazines. Pitching articles to blog magazines. Trying everything, because the further you can spread, the more people will hear about you. Now, sometimes the perceived wisdom is not to do serious marketing until you've got 2 or 3 books. And I can see the complete rationale on that, because you've got no history, you've got no solidity behind you. But I would say do the basics before the first book. Get your blog going, put your writing experience on, because then you've got a load of articles that you can use, something like retweet old post, and they keep coming up, and then you add to that body of work. And I think that's quite important. Doing collaborative things with other authors, having book sales together, doing summer reading and all that. Marketing is a slog. There is no silver bullet. I tell people it's not very good news. And I think you have to talk to people at events. You have to, for instance, we're doing this talk together. You very kindly invited me. This is part of marketing for me, because I'm telling you about my books and telling your audience about my books. If you have the time to do your own YouTube channel, that's good, podcast. But there's so much you can do, and you're still writing your books, and perhaps you've still got a day job or other responsibilities. Do what you're comfortable with, because if you're not, it will show. And I think try and make a complete mix of marketing. I think that's the solution. But try and do some every day, even if it's just a little post on your Facebook author page, or a few tweets, or doing a little blog post for somebody else. You've got to keep at it, I'm afraid.
And one of the things I caution the people in my courses is you don't want to post things like buy my book. You want to post more like bits of your book or interviews or things where you're talking about it instead of buy it.
I think when you've got a promotion running, you're entitled to say, just for this week or until midnight, this book is at 99 cents or whatever. I think that's permissible, but don't overdo it. You should be able to write some little posts on your blog and other people's blogs you can then link back to, that are sort of soft promo, if you like. How I wrote about the end of the Roman Empire. Why is Karina only a novel? Or The World of Karina, because we visited the US and Canada and we took loads of pictures, and I thought, I've got to set the first bit in Toronto around the Canada area. I must do that. So you can write and round the writing life, and I think that's more acceptable. Yeah, the old buy my book tweet during a promotion, it's not a big sin, but don't overdo it.
Yeah, because people get inundated with advertising all the time, so
yes,
you're just going to get lost in the mix there. But if you give something that's informational or entertaining, they're going to see it. It might stand out. And the idea is to get your mind, when they're in that bookstore on Amazon, to get them in the top, to get you in the top of their mind.
Hopefully so, yes. And I mean, connected with that is branding. That is quite important. It depends what genre you're writing in. But we all know when we see advertising on the television, oh yeah, that's such a thing. That's, I don't know, think of a famous brand, Coca-Cola, if you like. You recognize it from the writing and the red, and it immediately goes into, oh yeah, actually I feel a bit thirsty. I think I'll go and get a Coke. So you're suggesting. So their brand is very, very famous. My brand is the Eagle, this. And I have put this on every single book in a different color, like that. All of them have a different color, but the same symbol. Now, whether you, and also the other thing is the font, keep the font the same, keep certain, or if you have a little theme, if you're doing crime in the country, always have some dark woods on the front, or a similar type of building. I mean, Debbie Young writes cozy crime, and she's always got these lovely pastel colours, and she's got something quite villagey. You'll get a little thatched cottage, and you know you're in Sophie's world, if you like, the detective's world, and you know where you are, and you know that's the Debbie Young book. You see my rather fierce eagle with a modernistic design, you know you're in Romanova. And I think that deciding on the image you're going to project, if you want it in perhaps more normal terms, is very, very important, I think.
Do you get writer's block? And if so, what do you do about it?
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, writing's a job. If you get writers, I mean, it's horrible sometimes when I get it more with blog posts. I think, now what shall I write about? You just have got to put something down, tap on the keyboard or write on paper, even if it's complete rubbish and you're going to delete the whole thing. Or you just can't get stuck into this chapter and you've got to get round this plot point. Sorry, you can't go off and have a fit and go, oh, the muse is not with me. You can't do that. You've got to sit down on the damn chair and type. And that way you will write through it. That sounds ever so cruel, but if you don't put your 1,000 words or 500 words a day out, you're not treating it as a job. And I think writers, I think the best thing is, it's like falling off a bicycle. Don't go off and cry to mummy and never get on the bike again. You just get back on the bike.
Exactly, because if you treat it as a profession, if it's your job, your boss isn't going to accept, oh, I have job block, I'm not going to go to work today. Don't feel like it.
Oh yeah, I don't feel like coming to work.
And the boss is going to say, I don't feel like paying you.
Yeah, exactly. And here's your cards, goodbye.
Yeah, what I always do when I make sure that I write 45 minutes and then take a break for 15. And I actually have a goal of doing 5,000 words a day.
Oh, wow.
But I use dictation. So I dictate in there, and then that's publishable words a day. Mm-hmm. But I'm a ghostwriter, so I have to, because I get paid for writing.
Your job. Yeah. Pays
the bills. Yeah.
I aim for 1,000 because I do always have to spend quite a bit of time researching. So rather than, the words, I need to get the words out because the words have got to be there in the document before you can do anything with it. I am a bit of a research nerd, so I won't write something if I'm not sure. And I have a long conversation with another Roman writer. I don't know if you know Ruth Downey.
I don't.
Rousseau Medicus series, highly recommended. Absolutely hilarious. A Roman army medic. And she's very, very knowledgeable. Her degree wasn't history, but she knows everything. And I was saying, if an officer has been reassigned, he's on his way to his new posting from Britannia to Noricum, he's got to go on this road. I got the route sorted. Now, it's going to rain all the way through Britannia. It's the winter and northern Gaul. How's he going to stay dry and keep his stuff dry? Because there's no oiled fabrics then that I know of. He's got this thick cloak, this Virus Britannicus, which is really, really efficient, but does it really work? And how's he going to keep his stuff on the pack mules dry? And he's only got a leather satchel. That's not enough to put just a few little bits in. And I know that pack animals have a wooden frame and sort of panniers or packs underneath. So we've had this long email exchange. She said, I don't know. Oh, okay, right, they could do this. And we've gone back. And that is 2 lines in the story. So I will spend time doing that quite a lot of the time because somebody will write in saying you're wrong. But if I've done the research, I feel happy.
Yes. Have you ever tried audiobooks?
Yeah, I actually did have an arrangement with a literary agency in London, and they sold my first 4 books as audiobooks to Audible, in fact. And so the first 4 are available as audiobooks. I haven't done a second two because I'm not with the agency anymore. I'm thinking of getting the other two done. I know my voice isn't right, my own voice. I was going to approach the lady that did book 4, because that's the second trilogy, and it would be nice to have her continue the narration as Aurelia. I think I need to save a few pennies first, though.
Yes, well, you're in England. In the United States, Audible lets you do their program where you can hire their producers for half and half.
Yeah. Well, I'm in France, which is even worse.
Oh, okay.
They don't have it. I am sort of UK, Amazon and Audible are my home ones, if you like. But yeah, I don't think they do it at all in France. But yeah, it's a project for the future. Yes. We shall see.
Yeah, I have 26 books on Audible and I make a chunk of change from them and it just comes in.
Yeah. Well, I had quite a good deal when I signed up. So I'm probably still earning out. That was a mainstream deal, so I probably have to wait for a little while.
Of course. So, I'm coming to a close of the interview. Do you have any final closing remarks?
Well, no. When you asked me, you said, "Oh yes, I'll be talking about some things that perhaps I could mention to sort of newer writers," and I thought, yeah, I've been writing since the end of 2009 and I hadn't really realised I'd been writing all that time. And I also realised was an enormous amount I'd learnt on all kinds of things, writing and publishing. And I think you should always try and be in the frame of having an open mind, always learning. I went to a conference I've been to 3 this year, Crime Fest, Dublin Writers' Conference and the Romantic Novelists Association, and I was speaking at all of them. I'm now in the place where I speak at conferences rather than just going along to receive the information. But I went to other sessions and at all 3 I've learnt new things, and I thought I'd probably got to the stage where I knew most things. Never think that. It's a joyous ride because you keep learning new stuff. And I think that's a huge privilege in a profession, in a new profession. And I think that's something we enjoy. We don't get paid very much, so we have to have some kind of enjoyment.
That's true. That's true. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I've been with Alison Morton, and you're on the Author Talk with Richard Lowe show. If you like the show, be sure and subscribe, and you'll receive notifications of new shows. We're trying to do them twice a week with different authors. It's kind of aggressive, but so far it's been working out. So thank you for appearing on the show. Appreciate it.
And thank you very much for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Thank you.